been married for quite a while. Got a bunch of kids doing faith in style. They'll tell you that you're awesome and you're not alone. So let's start the show. Who knew Catholics could be so much fun? Greg and Jennifer and how faith is done. Screwing up and trying and forgiving. Adventures in imperfect living. Adventures in imperfect living.
Greetings, folks. I'm Greg Willits from RosaryArmy.com.
And I'm Jennifer Willits, his wife.
His coffee barista. Welcome to the program. It has been a interesting week. Lots more tech stuff that we've been dealing with the studio, but we're not going to get into that because we spent a lot of time talking about that last week. Good morning.
Good morning, Greg. How's that coffee?
Yeah, it's there. I mean, it's good coffee. It's excellent coffee. You roasted it. Yes, I acknowledge you. We cleaned the.
Affirm me, Greg.
We finally descaled the coffee maker. Apparently, that's a thing that you do that we didn't know about.
Well, see, yeah, I was actually going to talk about that this morning. It's
descaling.
Sort of, that awareness really reminded me of a show that Mac and Catherine put out, maybe a year and a half ago.
It's our friends Mac and Catherine from Catholic A Small Town.
Yes. When they had the realization that there is a cabin filter in their van that they had no idea.
Oh, that you have to change the air
that
filter?
It needed to be cleaned out or changed, and how many years it had been since they had done that. And they just like, I had no idea this was here, that it's all black and gunky. You have to clean it. And that was my equivalent moment with a coffee maker. But
have you ever actually changed an air filter in a vehicle?
I have purchased the air filter replacements. I've had other people do it for me.
You know what's interesting is you'll actually
I tried once.
You'll find moths in it. Somehow moths.
That's lovely.
I mean, if there wasn't that filter, you would have moths in your van.
No.
I almost always, every time I change it in your van or in the truck, I always see at least one moth.
Seriously.
The obligatory moth. Now, maybe it's a Toyota thing. I don't know.
See, like we need to get better about tracking when filters need to be changed. We have so many filters in our house that require changing. We got the water filter in the fridge. We're up on that. And then we got the ones for the AC. We got to do that. And now the ones for the van and the truck. I don't even know. When do you even change the truck?
And
have you done that?
Normally when the guy at the shop says, you want me to put in a new air filter?
Right.
I'm like, no, I can do that one. That's one of the few pieces of car maintenance I actually know how to do. I'll do that. So thank you for letting me know.
You.
I just wait for him to tell me that it's time.
Go ahead and put it on your Notion database.
Yeah, well, I was just about to say, you know how you could track an efficient way of tracking all of the different ways would be in a Notion database.
Greg, I am the Post-it note queen. I have Post-it note tracking that is very efficient for me. In fact, I already have one for descaling the coffee maker. I'm going to do that once a month. So I already have my Post note for descaling schedule.
Where do you put it?
It's in the cabinet. It's our, we have kitchen cabinets.
I hate that.
And some of our kitchen cabinets are designed to hold coffee paraphernalia. So when you open that cabinet door, you like my hand motions? I have to reenact everything when I talk because if you don't want me to talk, just tie my hands behind my back and it mutes me instantly.
Is that the solution? I've been looking for that for 28 years.
If you're watching the video, you'll see my hands in constant flapping around motion. But when you open up that cabinet door, you look to the right, you will see my Post-note reminders of when to change the little gas valve filter for my coffee can storage. Got to do that. You got to do that every 2 months.
Why don't you set a calendar event on your phone or something to alert you? Because if you just put it on a Post-it note and you stick it up on the cabinet, I don't understand. I personally don't understand how that actually reminds you, because I am convinced if you put something on a Post-it note, it is something that you become blind to. And I'll give you a perfect example in this room right now.
Okay.
Our son Ben had an idea. If you're watching the video on Rosary Army's YouTube channel right now, that we have a curtain that runs across one side of the studio room here. And it was a curtain that we used to have it downstairs, and it was two parts. So we left one part downstairs and brought the other one upstairs. And Ben, our mechanical engineering student, had an idea that he could create a pulley system that would, because the curtain needs to open in two different directions. So we have it in the middle of the room, and we want it to open part way on the left and part way on the right. And Ben had this idea for a pulley system. I could pull one rope, and then the curtain would go in both ways. So he drew a very simple schematic, and put it on a
Post-it
note. And he put the Post-it note not in his work area in his room or around his computer, but he brought it upstairs and did me the favor of putting it on one of the utility poles that we have in the studio. And it will stay there until I remove it, because no one else will have memory of the existence of that Post-it note. And oftentimes you have written things on Post-it notes, and I will actually do it because they drive me nuts. But for most people, they're not bothered by the existence of Post-it notes. And so they write it down and like, I got it out of my head. I put it down on a Post-it note, and then it never gets accomplished. It never is done.
Okay, hold on now, Greg. You, as the creator and the creative in this family, admit several times that there are times where you just need to sit and not actually take out an action item on the thing that you're thinking about, but there's an importance to just sort of percolating on an idea for a long period of time.
Okay.
That Post note might actually be fulfilling a very similar function of idea is not dead. It's percolating. It's allowing us, like, do we still want to do this? It's asking us the question, do you still want to do my little action item on the Post note?
It wasn't my idea or desire for that device. It was Ben's.
So maybe we should relocate the Post note and put it on Ben's computer.
Let that dang thing percolate somewhere else.
So that he can percolate on this idea.
Go do your own percolating in your own personal places.
Well, hold on now. I want to circle back to the coffee, because I've been on a mission. It all started with, how's that coffee that you're drinking over there? Because, yes, I didn't even know about the descaling until one event sort of allowed another event to occur. So I would never have descaled our existing machine had I not tried.
Until a lizard actually came crawling out, and it's like, there's the source of the scales. We need to start descaling.
What is that black sludge-like product in the bottom of the coffee machine?
That just happens if you have hard water in your house anyway.
Well, see, and I'm so glad you said that, because I didn't even know what kind of water we had. I was on a customer service phone call with another company, and she's like, well, depending on if you have soft water, then you have to have this kind of descaling schedule. If you have hard water, then you have to do another descaling schedule.
What kind of water do you have, ma'am? Liquid?
It's yes.
It's mostly clear.
And she sounded very, she was another very competent, intelligent female doing customer service, and I have resolved myself to be very polite and kind to these kind people who this is their job. They are customer service people. You will never meet them. They're just on the phone, and you need them. You need their help. It doesn't help them if you get mad at them. Like it's their personal fault that you're having a problem over something.
How long have you held that viewpoint?
When you brought it to my attention recently that you're mean. When you don't get your way, Jennifer, it's like you're taking it out on that individual.
On calls, that kind of thing.
Calls.
Yeah.
However, I could retaliate with something that you do that I would never do in a million years. Like when you get an unsolicited telemarketer calling you about either a political survey or something, you love and relish the idea of messing with them and like talking back at them.
Totally different thing.
And I'm just like, I can't do that because I'm like, that's a poor soul.
Totally different.
That person is just doing a job.
No.
Supporting their families.
No. It's totally different thing because they're either scammers or they're doing political telemarketing calls. And so if they're calling me at dinner time, then and it's not for a service. And I've told them many times, take my phone off your list. And the problem that I get even angrier about is I've had my personal cell phone number for well over 15 years.
Well, it's Chris's number.
And some dude named Chris, or it could be a woman, I don't know.
Yeah, we don't know.
At some point had my phone.
They were an assigned at birth male.
Apparently, they're a registered Democrat and with like the most liberal parties whatsoever. And so all throughout the election cycle, I was getting texts and phone calls about supporting pro-abortion initiatives I have no tolerance whatsoever for that. So
what you're saying is you have an opportunity to evangelize the faith.
Well, I did. I know I totally did. If I got texts from them
with a little snark.
If I got texts from them, I would say, thank you for the reminder. I'm absolutely going to vote for the party that is very pro-life, no matter the race, because Planned Parenthood targets abortion mills in black communities more than any other, and there's stats to show that. And so I would throw that back, and I would send them links, and they were like, "Okay, thank you for your opinion. We appreciate you." I'm like, "Do you?" I don't think you do. Autoresponder.
Okay. So
that's another thing. Most of these are autoresponders. So I can't say that I can't be held responsible for being snarky back to like
a robot.
It's probably an AI computer that's sitting there's the Chat GPT. Just they have autoresponders coming back at me.
Okay. So to circle back to my customer service.
One more thing.
Call.
Wait a minute. One more thing.
You keep derailing me.
Are we going to be responsible for the way that we think about computers as AI continues? We should write down AI. We're going to talk about AI. We'll come back to that.
Okay, we're going to circle back to AI and the morals of, are we morally complicit if we are rude to an AI machine? Because they don't have a soul. All right, AI, go ahead.
AI and moral complicity. I'm writing this as a topic. We're going to do this here in just a moment on the program.
Of course, it looks like you wrote Al and moral complicity.
Al, and so, yes.
Okay, so this very kind woman on the customer service said, you have to know the kind of water you have. And I'm like, okay, well, how do I know? As a homeowner, it's not like we have, I don't know, this kind of instant knowledge of the kind of water we have. We just turn on the faucet, expect to see it come out, and we're good for the most part. And so she said, all right, well, we
don't need to know what chemicals. We don't need to know the levels of fluoride or,
Right. I mean, I actually did have our water tested. And if you are curious about the quality of your water, you should be able to call your local water, whoever you pay the water bill to, that magical place. Yeah. And you can ask a technician to come out.
You could look that up on Google.
Test your water.
Who is my local water, whoever tests the thing that we do thing?
Yeah, that's a great keyword search.
There's a keyword search. Yes. Put it in quotes and you'll get exactly the response that you want.
And they will let you know the chemical composition, if it skews with a high pH, low pH, all that kind of thing. And anyway, I don't want to go on a rabbit trail of why I even did that, but I was told by my local county water supplier that our water does tend to have this biofilm buildup thing that is mostly harmless. It looks like mold, but it really kind of isn't, but you will get a lot of buildup coming out of the little faucet heads, and you'll have to clean that with bleach every so often. I'm like, oh. So I got hard water.
A bullet is mostly harmless until you put it into a gun and cock the trigger and right. shoot it at somebody.
But if it's in a box
if
on
it's
a
just
shelf,
sitting there,
whatever.
Bullet, it's mostly harmless.
Yeah, it's just completely
mostly harmless.
Innocent there. So because I was aware conclusively that we had hard water, she's like, well, you should be descaling your coffee machine probably monthly, especially if you use it as much as you purportedly do. So I'm
yes.
Oh.
And descaling is what?
And so about that process. So I had you just looked it up. You were just curious. I don't know why you did, but you said, okay, you just got to use a lot of vinegar.
I went into Google and I said, how do you do that thing that the person at the water thing that said the thing that takes care of the thing tells us to do? And it just came right up with instructions for descaling your coffee maker.
So dear listener, we are 52 years old, so we should know some of this.
We should be better about this kind of stuff.
By now, especially as much as we love coffee, and we love not just coffee, but a really good, clean cup of coffee. That matters to us. So you would think we would have known the obvious thing about descaling the machine. So we did for the first time in January of 2023. This is going to be part of our New Year's resolution, is to have good, clean coffee. So now if you come over and you get a cup of coffee from us, you can have confidence that there won't be this biofilm floating around in the coffee. It will be clean, pure, clean coffee.
I think this is how Folgers got away with so much in the 70s and 80s, because they just called those little floaters in the biofilm, those are just flavor crystals.
Yes.
It's made with Folgers flavor crystals.
But doesn't that just sound beautiful? Flavor crystals. Like there's just hope in that phrase.
It's the best part of waking up, Jennifer.
It's the good feelings that we all want. You want good feelings. Don't you want good feelings?
I do. I'm going to completely change the subject without a proper transition.
Do we need a segue? Do we need to clink our mugs or something as our segue? We're changing.
There.
Wow, that was tough.
Yeah, something to break.
I'm gonna break my mug.
We did not mention on the last program the passing of Pope Benedict XVI, and we recorded it a couple days after he died, and then this week, relatively fast compared to the way that we took care of your mom. It took us 10 days from your mom's death until her burial, and so it kind of caught me off guard a little bit, quite honestly. How fast. He died on Saturday, and his funeral was on Thursday. And we didn't talk about how Pope Benedict XVI has impacted us in many ways. And I actually sent out a newsletter to the Rosary Army community. And so if you're on our newsletter list, you would have gotten that. If you want to be on the list, you can go over to rosaryarmy.com.
That was very, very well written, by the way.
I
I read it,
that.
and I was very moved by what you said and how eloquently you said it.
Well, maybe you can help me remember some of the things, because it's been a week, and just like podcasting, when I write something, I oftentimes forget about it as soon as I write it. But the day that he died, I sat down and I wrote about ways that he impacted this apostolate, this ministry of Rosary Army. Rosary Army started under the papacy of Pope John Paul II, and I've told this story many, many times, where in September of 2002, for whatever reason, I started making all twine knotted rosaries. I was inspired to do so, and I started giving them away to whoever I saw. And if I ran into you and I had a finished rosary in my pocket, I gave you one. And I was making rosaries while standing in line at the grocery store, because this was before we all had cell phones 20 years ago. And someone would say, "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm making a rosary," and it was a great evangelization tool. And I could say, "Here, take this one." And I would give them one, whether or not they asked for it or not, or if they knew what to do with it or not. Just get it out there. And then the month after Rosary Army started, or this making rosaries started, John Paul II declared the year of the rosary, and he released a letter called Rosarium Virginis Mariae. And it was just an amazing letter that really educated me about the rosary in a way that I had never been educated before. Continued making the rosaries for the next few months, and then in March, I was making my total consecration to Jesus through Mary. And that same week, put rosaryarmy.com online. So that's why we're celebrating the 20th anniversary of Rosary Army right now. We're kind of in that time right now where I was making rosaries, but the name Rosary Army had not been thought of yet. The website had not gone online yet. That was in March that all kind of came together. And so that was in 2003.
And what happened in 2003? Was that in light of Pope Benedict?
Well, that's where I'm getting to.
Okay.
We still had Pope John Paul II. And so he was very motivational in the first couple of years. And we started podcasting in March of 2005. And if you'll recall, those first few weeks of us doing the podcast, it was again, a lot of experimental stuff. We didn't know what we were doing, but we knew that John Paul II was sick. And we knew that he was ending his life. And a lot of early Catholic podcasters actually did a special podcast that we each devoted our episodes to talking about John Paul II. And it was a very small crowd. Basically, there was like 12 podcasts, 12 Catholic podcasts. And so that meant that there were 12 Catholic podcast listeners at that time, because the only people listening to Catholic podcasts were the 12 people that were actually making them back in March 2005. So we were listening to each other's shows. And so we all kind of bound together, and we made that decision that we would all do a show about John Paul II. Father Roderick was actually over in Rome. He was there at the Vatican. I believe he was there when John Paul II died, and then went back for the conclave. I think that's how that worked out. And so early on in Rosary Army, particularly early on in our podcasting efforts, so we started podcasting in March of 2005, and then Joseph Ratzinger was elected Pope in April of 2005, the next month. And both John Paul II and Benedict XVI had a strong emphasis on the new evangelization. And this had a huge impact on us. In fact, we created another division of Rosary Army called newevangelizers.com. I wrote a book called The New Evangelization in You, Be Not Afraid. Very, very motivated by their enthusiasm. And Pope Benedict XVI even established an office of new evangelization at the Vatican. And it's quite honestly saddened me for the last 10 years, almost 10 years, because it'll be in March, it'll be 10 years since Benedict resigned, that there's been very little talk of the new evangelization and the benefit of it. And a lot of people have seen it as a failed experiment. And sadly, I don't think it was a failed experiment. I think it was doing a lot of great good. I think that when the leader stops focusing on it, things fall to the wayside. And that's what happened over the last 10 years. And that I'm not saying that to just, slam Pope Francis, but the fact is I have personally never heard him speak about the new evangelization and sharing our faith and knowing our faith more deeply and living out our faith more fully.
Well, I would like to make a comment on that. He definitely is pushing a way of seeing the world as just more consistent with fraternal brotherhood and social justice. And that's kind of his
right.
evangelization tool is not, it's like the message is different.
Well,
perhaps.
It is. But John Paul II and Benedict, let's understand our faith. Let's understand our liturgy. Let's understand the history of our faith. Let's understand the deepness of prayer. Let's understand our relationship with Jesus Christ. And where I'm going with this is I found it so inspirational after Pope Benedict XVI was elected in 2005 in April, that his first letter, which came out in December of 2005, was a letter called Deus Caritas Est, which means God is love. And you can find this on the Vatican's website. And it was a letter he wrote it to all the bishops, priests, deacons, men and women religious, and all the lay faithful. It's a document on Christian love and what it really means. And this document, I actually was asked to give a talk at a youth group, and I hadn't yet read it. I said, at this point, and this is something else that's been lost, there was, to me at least, I had a great amount of trust when the Pope, now maybe is also, let me just say, even though I'm a cradle Catholic, I very much was a neophyte in my faith in the early 2000s, in that I was really rediscovering my Catholic faith, and I was embracing my Catholic faith, and I was falling in love on a daily basis with my Catholic faith. And so I wanted to absorb as much of it as I could. And so I had this naive attitude that when John Paul II wrote Rosarium Virginis Mariae, I thought this is going to be a game changer. The Pope wrote a letter, I need to take it into consideration. Any other letter that Pope John Paul II wrote, I consumed it. And I tried to start going backwards and reading other letters that had happened beforehand. Humana Vitae, an important letter. I just started to see great importance when the Pope wrote and released a letter to the lay faithful. It was something that we needed to read, absorb, digest, and then live out in our lives. And again, sadly, in the current papacy, what's happened is letters have come out that have actually been questionable. People start going, well, that seems like it actually contradicts everything that we were told before. And then that doesn't make sense, because most of the letters, at least most letters that I've seen, even the letters from Vatican II, the 16 documents from Vatican II, don't necessarily change anything. What changed was the way that they implemented it afterwards. There's actually a great amount of beauty in the 16 documents of Vatican II, but it was the abuses that happened in the implementation of it and the irregularities that went into place of doing things like, holding hands during the Our Father, or in my case, I saw streamers being thrown at Palm Sunday and beach ball balloons being tossed around in the middle of Mass and puppets and whatever, right? Those things were abuses of the liturgy. But the documents of Vatican II never said, thou shalt implement a puppet ministry. I mean, that never happened. So the documents were always really, really clear and useful and beautiful. And then this might be a weakness on my own part, a critical nature of mine, but in the last 10 years, whenever I've tried to read one of Pope Francis's letters, I've always walked away kind of frustrated and disillusioned and confused. And all this, so to go back to Benedict, with Benedict, I always walked away enlightened and excited for the faith. In his very first letter, and again, if you're going to respond to this comment in any way of everything I've said, please know that my purpose in bringing this up is not about what Francis has done the last 10 years or has not done. It really is to drive in the point of how much of an impact first John Paul II, but really Benedict, had in our own taking the faith seriously and taking digital media seriously. Every year on, I believe it's January 28th, I think is the feast day of St. Francis de Sales. On that day, historically, the Pope has put out a message for media producers in the world and driving in to journalists or whoever it might be, writers and that kind of thing. There's always been like a letter of encouragement that's come out. St. Francis de Sales is the patron saint of writers. And so it's come out. So Pope Benedict oftentimes would write about the world needing digital media missionaries. And he started writing about this in the early days of his pontificate back in 2005. Right when we were podcasting, right before YouTube took off, right as blogs were a thing. And so we really took this to heart of like, yes, this is such a needed thing in the world. Why? Because so many people on the 7 continents aren't showing up in their churches. They exist on what Benedict coined as the digital continent. And so we need to still to this day, what Benedict told us to do, I still think we need to do, which is what we're doing right now. And we're constantly trying to grow out the efforts that we're doing with media. We need to go out to the digital continent and we need to evangelize the new evangelization with new methods, new enthusiasm to the people that exist there. So if you're watching on YouTube, hi, subscribe, like, comment, blah, 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 blah. All those kinds of things. The first letter that he wrote, though, Deus Caritas Est, God is love, I was asked by that youth group to give a talk on it. And I remember spending a Sunday afternoon trying to get through this thing. And the talk is online, too, if you look around for it enough. And it's one of the first early talks I gave. I'm still trying to get my legs under me of how to put these things together. And the fact that I was giving a talk about a papal letter, an encyclical letter to a bunch of teenagers, how do I make it interesting?
That's a tough audience.
It's a tough audience. The biggest takeaway I got from this, and it's something that I've just carried with me, and I find it so insightful that this was the first thing that Benedict chose to write about was God's love for us, and that God is love, and that when we live in God's love and when we love others the way that God intends for us to love, that we are truly... That's the way that we grow closer to him because we become more like him. If God is love, and the more that we love, the more we become like him, and that's what he tells us to do.
Yeah, well, I'd like to make a comment on God is love for a moment because...
I'd like to make a comment on God.
Yeah, just
a general
comment.
God is great. He is good.
God is great. God is good.
Okay, all right.
Let us thank him for our food. Okay. When I've been listening to the Mystical City of God, a wonderful podcast put out by Father Edward Looney, which we've had on the show.
Pray for him, by the way. He went to the hospital last night. He had an elevated heartbeat up in the 170s.
No.
And they thought he had a blockage. So be praying for Father Looney.
Okay. I'm so glad.
I just saw that. I just saw that this morning.
I really appreciate this man a great deal. And as he was commenting on one of the paragraphs in that 4-volume set, The Mystical City of God, he was reminding me some of the basic truths of the Rosary and how the first 3 theological virtues, which we pray the introductory 3 Hail Marys for the virtue of faith, hope, and love, that is for us to reconnect to our primary relationship with God. So when we say for an increase in faith, hope, and love, it's in God that we want that increase. Now, because we're broken, we're human, we falter all the time, but God is always loving us, right? So that we know as a fact. We have it in Scripture, we have tradition, we have the church telling us that same message. God is perfect love, unbroken, never ending. So if you ask yourself this question, how did I experience and feel God's love today? That's a very interesting question to ask. And every day you will have a slightly different answer. And if you're not feeling God's love, well, is it because God stopped loving you? Or is it perhaps you have a blockage that got thrown up and now you can't receive it because you have put up a blocker? And that could be in the form of sin. It could be in the form of because we're loving something else. We have put another God before our true God in the form of distractions. And I recently went to this teacher training as we're preparing to get back to a new school year. And we were reminded in this talk that we are like a cup, a beautiful cup that is meant to be filled with God. And if we are struggling to receive God, it's because we've already got our cup full of other things. And we have to empty ourselves in order to fully receive him, which is why we on the show will talk about surrendering, letting go. We got to empty our little cups in our souls so that God can fill it, so that we can be more connected to the love that is always being given to us. And so I wanted to put that out there for you to meditate on, maybe even write about in your journal. Maybe you're journaling this year. I am. And I'm going to really look for where God is in my life, and then celebrate that, meditate on it, and stay connected to the one who loves me, my creator. And he's the one who loves you because he's your creator too. So that, when you said God is love, I'm like, what a beautiful way for Pope Benedict to really kind of launch his values and what he cares about to the world of Catholics. But I did have a memory of when Pope Benedict was announced as our new pope. I think we all kind of remember maybe where we were, what we were doing. And I remember this phrase coming out that as a new Catholic, I mean, I was in my 30s, when Pope Benedict began his reign as pope. The phrase was, the cafeteria is now closed. And I found that so curious. I'm like, what cafeteria?
He didn't say that.
That was what people were saying about
commentators
Pope.
were saying that online.
The cafeteria is now closed. And so as a new Catholic, you talked about we're all in journeys of our faith and maturity. And at that time, I was still very much like, very optimistic about everything. It's like, well, no, there's only one Catholic faith. Therefore, there's only one kind of Catholic. So what do you mean? Cafeteria, what does that even mean? And then once I started to get the meaning of, you mean people are picking and choosing and basically creating their own version of a Catholic identity and a faith to believe in, and that's what, like when I was awakened to that reality, it really began with Pope Benedict's reign. And I didn't know that there was this sense of a traditional and a conservative or a liberal. Like, those words were not even in my brain back then in the early 2000s. And but I can really credit Pope Benedict. And he didn't even know he did that, but there was something about what commentators were saying about him that kind of woke that up in me. And I'm very grateful to now know a little bit more of the reality of how the faithful live out their faith and how it's so different, and we're not unified in this at all.
Well, and again, I won't say that the cafeteria Catholicism thing exists because of a lack of understanding of language. I think people that differ or deliberately protest, right, against what the Catholic Church teaches. So you have Catholics that use contraception, even though the teaching is clear and beautiful, and actually the rewards are enormous in terms of strengthening relationships and strengthening marriages. Contraception divides, but many people want to say, well, but I choose to use contraception despite knowing that the church says that. So you have this discrepancy, right? And so that's not necessarily a language thing. That is just a flat out abandonment of thing. But just in the last 10 years or so, there's been a phrase, for example, well, love is love, right? Love is love.
Yeah, and it sounds so good on the surface,
well,
does it not?
But see, here's what's interesting. And going back to 2005, in the first letter from Pope Benedict XVI, he wrote this document, God is love. And the very first thing that he tackles in this document is the fact that we have a problem of language. And this was such, again, you got to go back when this was written. So it's coming up on, 17 years ago itself. Diving in and having an understanding of Latin or Greek and applying that to my faith, that was a new concept of trying to understand that a word that I know, love, could mean multiple things depending on how I use it, right? So when I gave that talk to those teenagers, the example I gave was I got up, and it's funny as I listened to the beginning of it, and it made me cringe some of the references I made to these teenagers back then, that even then the teenagers probably didn't know the references. Do you know where I'm going with this?
Yes, I do.
What did I say?
You're saying I love Lickamate sticks, and they all just looked at you like, "Who are you?"
Okay, that was one of the things. I love Lickamate sticks, right?
Yeah.
So the Lickamate powder, and Amy's the one who sends me Lickamate on occasion.
Listener and supporter, Amy.
Yeah, she'll sometimes, especially when they go on sale, like after Valentine's Day, she knows I don't necessarily eat the powder, so she's cut just the sticks off in the packets and sent me the packets with anyway.
It's sugar.
But
it's a sugar
I
stick.
love Lickamate sticks, right? So can I say I love Lickamate sticks, and then I love my wife. So is that love is love, right? So do I love Lickamate sticks in the same way I love my wife? Of course not, right? But the other example that I gave to the teens, that Lickamate sticks, I thought that was an okay thing. Some of them knew what those were.
Yeah.
But one of the examples I gave was Jody loves Chachi.
Oh, Greg. Wow.
So even in 2005, I'm using that. So now imagine if I said that now, they'd be like, what are you talking about? Who is Joni and who is Chachi? Who would name their child Chachi?
No, you'd have to pick a very very visible couple today.
But my point is, I say, I love that show. I love that thing. I love, toast, whatever. I love coffee, right? I love coffee. I don't love coffee like I love my wife. And so what Benedict dove into was the very, very specific words that were used in Scripture originally to explain the different versions of love. He said, today the term love has become one of the most frequently used and misused of words, a word to which we attach quite different meanings. And he then dove into all of the vast semantic range of the word love. But how, if we're going to say God is love, we need to understand what we're saying, right? Caritas is the word. That's the root of the word charity. And so oftentimes you mentioned at the beginning of the Rosary, we pray for an increase in faith, hope, and love. Yeah. Or you might say faith, hope, and charity. Charity and love, in that case, they're intermingled, because the root word is caritas, is what we're really talking about. And that's a very specific type of love. The other types of love, and Benedict talked about this, eros and agape. And there's big differences in those two versions. Eros is more of an erotic type of love, right? More of a passion. And so you might have an eros towards a person, but you could also have an eros towards a thing where it is a consuming, you just love it so much and you want more and more and more of it. But it's not a sacrificial love like what God has for us. It is not an all-consuming love like what God has for us. We are called to have caritas for each other. In a married couple, we might have that eros can be in existence in a married couple, and it can still be good and pure and lovely. The agape is more of, it is a true deep love. God really agapes us, right? It is a complete and full giving. And so when you say I love you, are you willing to do what sacrificial love is necessary, that agape? Are you willing to go really deep in your sacrifice and in your all-giving love? Or is it just a high-level passion? Is it a intimate physicality of things? And then there's other forms of the word love that he talks about. Storage is a form of love, and I always mispronounce that one. I never know what the emphasis on the G is when you pronounce it. Storage is that form of love.
Maybe it's storage.
Yeah, it probably is. That would make more sense for it to be storage.
Rather than just storage.
Or storage. But then the other one is philia, which that one is easy because you think about Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. Yeah. I have a philia love for some of our friends, right? I don't have an agape love necessarily, though I possibly could, and I certainly don't have an eros love for them. I have an agape, or I have an agape or a philia love for them. And that idea of love, and obviously we're doing a super high level overview of this document, but the idea that really the greatest love that we've experienced is in Jesus Christ, who is the incarnate love of God. God's love so powerful for us that he incarnated, he became man for our sake, so that he lowered himself to our state so that we can be elevated to his. And Jesus Christ truly is the incarnate love. This document, it's one of those documents that here we are all these years later talking about it, and the impact that a man had with a single document. But it was so much more than that. It was all of his subsequent documents that he released. And even, as if you're watching the video right now and, we have the rotating images in the background, you see every once in a while an image of the catechism comes up. And we've been hosting a podcast for the last couple of years called Catechism Class. Father Mike Schmitz, he's following up his super popular Bible in a year, and he's doing Catechism in a year. I think it's really interesting that there it is. The image just popped up on the screen for Catechism Class. We've been doing a show for a couple of years. Father Mike's doing a show now. There's other people talking about the catechism. Well, who was at the forefront of the catechism? It was promulgated by John Paul II, but it was Benedict who oversaw the creation of it. And then right after he became Pope, he issued the compendium of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, which is more of a question and answer format of the catechism. Why? So that we might better understand our faith, that we might better know it, we might better live it, and that we can more effectively share it. And I would dare say it was because of those two popes, even though there are people online that have some issue with some of the things that they did and said, well, guess what? They're men, and they make mistakes. But their efforts of new evangelization impacted us, and in return has impacted other people. And so when we knew he was sick, and the news had been saying he's in his last days, and even on the Wednesday before he died, Pope Francis, during the general audience, told the faithful that they should be praying for Pope Benedict XVI and that he was going to go see him right away. We learned later on that reportedly, right after or that afternoon, Pope Benedict XVI received his last rites. I assume it was from Pope Francis. I don't know for certain, but he received last rites. And then he died on Saturday. And so we knew. And Friday night, Saturday night, I was having a hard time sleeping again. And I woke up around 5 o'clock, 5:30. And I went ahead in the darkness of our room, instead of taking out my book, I just went through, well, maybe I did use my book and a book light and did Liturgy of the Hours. And that takes me a while in the morning to get through both Office of Readings. And the reason why I say it takes me a while is because I really had started waking up to the day, and my mind was very prayerful because I just read all through Office of Readings and all through and it takes me half an hour to 45 minutes to get through all of that. And then I finished, and stupidly still laying in bed, I pulled out my iPad. I'm like, well, let me just pull up,
the news.
Let me pull up new Advent, right?
Yeah.
Go on to Facebook, and right away I saw he's gone, and just pounds you, when someone who had such an impact, and you could say he's had an impact on your life, right? But you don't really realize it until they're gone. And I remember you're still sleeping, and I got up, and I was getting dressed, and I just didn't know what to do with myself.
You had this really big news.
Well,
and you were the only one in the household that knew it at that moment.
I was trying to absorb it, but to absorb it, I needed to say it out loud. And I can't remember if I went and made the coffee. I just remember but I came back in the room, and I don't like waking you up for anything. And I just woke you up. I had to wake you up, and I'm like, he's gone. And as soon as I said it, I just started sobbing. And then that confused me. It's like, why am I crying for a man that I never even met? I was sobbing. Why am I sobbing for a man I've never even met? And the only time that we've ever seen him in person, we saw him during a general audience. The one time that we got to go to Rome, and he was about this big, in the window way up here. It's like, oh, there's Benedict. I tried to take pictures, and it's like you can't even tell. It's like you couldn't even see
Pope here.
Yeah, it's like
arrow.
Yeah. But I'm so appreciative of the fact that we at least were able to do that. So.
Yeah.
How do you wrap that up? Obviously be praying for the repose of his soul, but
and really we have been, and still obviously continue your prayers for Pope Francis. Regardless of how you feel about the man, it's so important to cover our current Pope in a lot of prayer. And so one thing I've started to do when we pray our family rosary, when we get towards the end and we're approaching the conclusionary prayers of the Rosary, we do like to pray for the intentions of the Pope. But then, you are free to add a little line or two. So I've just been praying for the protection from all evil for Pope Francis. If he is protected from all evil. Isn't that like a good thing? And then he will be purely safe and a solid leader of the truth and courageous to be faithful to the teachings of Christ always, no matter what, I can't even imagine the pressure on the current Pope, whoever, is the current leader. They're getting it from all sides, from governments, from within. It can't be an easy job. And so I just know that he needs our protection. He doesn't need our protection, like we're the bodyguards, but he needs our prayers for protection from all evil. So I felt like that was a little harmless one line to add into the family rosary as we pray for him, that he finishes out his pontificate well. And I know there are a lot of people who have a lot of issues with him. So all we can do is pray, and praying is not nothing. That's like a really, really big thing. And so that's part of what I will be increasing for this year and this new year, because now we know Pope Benedict did not make it into 2023. I mean, literally on the last day of the year, like how fitting, how very fitting it was that.
That's how the year ended.
That's how the year ended, and of course, since death recently affected our family as my mother passed away this past December 6th. And I also had that realization that my mom did not make it into this year. This year of 2023 does not have my mother in it. And I needed to sort of absorb that and process that. And just, for an update, I think on the last podcast, I talked about where I was in the grieving process, and things are still going well. I'm still allowing the memories to kind of come.
I'm still in denial.
No. And what really helps me is just looking at photographs of my parents, and it really is. It's such a big idea. It is such a big idea to know that your parents are gone and they're not easily accessible anymore. I can only pray for them and pray for their souls.
Well, here's the cool thing
that
that
we could absorb this.
We could say this for those who are watching this on Rosary Army's YouTube channel and watching right now. You can kind of see that there's a Mary statue poking out from behind my head. I'll move off to the side there, and if you could see the shelf that Mary is sitting on right there. That shelf was made by one Hector Alvarez before his passing, and I have three more that I'm going to prop up. We have a statue of St. Louis Marie de Montfort, and I think it's going to go like right underneath her right there. And so even in our studio, I've had these shelves that I haven't used all four of them that he made before he died, and this is where they're going to end up, which I think is pretty cool. So you talked about looking at pictures of your parents.
Yes.
There's little touches, right? There's little things that pop up every once in a while that. And constant reminders of your folks.
I received an email from a listener who was expressing their condolences to me about, the passing of my mother, the recent passing of my mom. And he shared a story about his mother's passing, which was definitely a more intense experience than anything I went through with mine. But in that email, I shared something with him that I will share with you. And this was just my response, that what I've done now, like the way if I'm praying a rosary by myself, I do pray a rosary every day, yes, but not all of those rosaries are actually with my family. Sometimes due to scheduling, we kind of have to pray it on our own. And if I have the opportunity to pray by myself, I typically go back in my closet, which is where I have a little holy corner set up. I've got my icons on the wall. And the crucifix that used to hang in my mother's room is now mounted on the wall for me to meditate on, and I have candles and I have a journal and Bibles, blah, blah. It's my little desk and chair corner of the closet, which I'm very fortunate that there's enough room that allows me to do that. And now I take the funeral program from my father's funeral and now the funeral program from my mom's funeral, and I just sort of lay them out in front of me. I don't know why. I just feel like it's a way to sort of connect with them spiritually. I know they're, that's everything now is spiritual.
Well, it's the communion of saints.
It's the communion of saints. And so I don't want to forget them. I don't want to forget their beautiful smiling faces. And, the photos that you put on the funeral programs, you try to pick a nice one, like the best photo that's the most recent that just shows the life in their eyes and their zest for living, So those are the photos that get used. And I remember when those photos were taken because they just did not feel all that long ago. And what's interesting to me to reflect on is at the moment that either Greg took that picture or I took that picture of my mother or my father, you don't know in that moment that one day that could be the photo that graces the cover of their funeral program. Like how surreal is that? Like, had I known that when I took that picture of my mom, which was on her birthday, and she was very happy, she had her hair done. And so it was all about life and celebrating the joy of living. Snap, got the picture, not knowing that was the one I would be drawn to years in the future. It's like, this is the one I want to go on her funeral program. So I needed to just sort of meditate on that and feel those moments of that's life. You don't know. You never know from one moment to the next the significance of the moment that you're in sometimes for a future date. So I pray my individual rosary with kind of like the memory of my parents and trying to connect with them on the communion of saints, as Greg said. And anyway, I wanted to share that with you. It's a beautiful memory for me and one that I'm trying to not forget, because I am the one, between Greg and myself, I'm the one who forgets things. Greg has the powerful memory where he never forgets anything. He's got the associative memory like magnified exponentially. And my memory is so different. I am so rooted in the present, and I tend to just let go of a lot of things, and it's harder for me to reconnect to events of the past. Not that they're gone. I just have to work harder to retrieve the memory. And so I am taking a cue from my mother, who was really good about writing a grateful journal, and I have maintained it so far. I talked about it briefly on the last episode. I really want to maintain and start a grateful journal and just write the good stuff. And there will be no complaints, no fighting with the Lord, no lamentations of, where I got to wrestle and just get it all out there. That's not the purpose of this journal.
Earlier you were saying about the need to focus on God's presence and when did you see God today?
How did you experience God's love today?
And one of the things I was actually going to say is that I read just recently, it's in Thanksgiving that we oftentimes are tied into a greater connection to God, because if we focus on the Thanksgiving, it allows us to more clearly see Him. And it's not that we don't lament to Him. There's a whole book in the Bible called Lamentations, full of Psalms of David reaching out, and he's lamenting in the Psalms as well.
Feeling anxious about something.
And so it's not that you're a bad person if you lament to God. He wants to hear your concerns and worries, and He wants to be there for you because He's a loving, merciful Father. He's Caritas, right? He's charity. God is love. But when you said that earlier, it made me think of one of the things that can help us is gratefulness, and trying at least once a day for what was one thing I need to be grateful for. Not that I should be grateful for, but sometimes it's difficult for certain personality types to acknowledge, yes, good things did occur, because we wanted to just hone in on the negative. So I thought that was an interesting thing. Yeah. Tying it back real quick to your parents, we could ask for their intercession now. The church is broken up into three groups, kind of, right? We could talk about the church militant, the church triumphant, and the church suffering. The church militant, that's those of us here on earth still fighting our way in the world today, giving everything we got. And sometimes we need to take a break from all of our worries. It sure would help a lot. And we're the church militant. The church suffering are those who are in purgatory, who are going through their final purgation so that they will have entrance into heaven. If you're in purgatory, you will end up in heaven. And then there's the church suffering are not those in hell. Those are the damned. The church triumphant are those in heaven. And we don't know for certain if your parents are in heaven. Right. They could very well be in purgatory. Lily recently got in a conversation with her vocal coach, who was just like, well, what do you mean if your grandmother's in heaven? And Lily's like,
the vocal coach is Baptist.
Yeah. And Lily's like, so, you can, do I want to go?
Wow, I didn't know about that.
And so Lily didn't really get into it. I said, all you got to tell her is like, hey, both St. Peter and St. Paul wrote in their letters that they're working out their salvation in fear and trembling, and they worried about tossing it away. If they were worried about losing it, you should be worried about losing it as well. I mean, it's in the Bible. Why do you hate the Bible so much? If you, that'll shut things down. But all of those. Anyway, what are you going to say?
Well, actually, I wanted to give an update on something I talked about in a very inspired moment on the last show, where I just felt very suddenly teary over the idea that I need to go on a silent retreat.
That was 2 weeks ago.
That was 2 weeks ago already? Oh, man. Okay.
And I never followed up on it for the reason that it got complicated really quick.
Yeah, and that's okay. But I mentioned it to the Barons, I guess, when we were over there for New Year's.
And that's the complication that got me. It's like she mentioned it, and then Catherine was like, I want to go. I'm like, never mind. I'm not going to try to arrange this for two women.
So first of all, we did, in fact, spend New Year's Eve with the Barons, and it was perfectly just relaxed, wonderful. You know, had a couple fireworks to deal with, which was okay. We survived.
Well, did you see the text that I sent to our little group text the other day with the picture, the photo I found?
Yes.
Yeah. So
yes.
Facebook,
That was a great picture of Catherine and Tristan.
Facebook memories popped up a picture, and I made a comment. It was a picture from 4 years ago when we spent New Year's with the Barons, and in the background you just see like this empty tray where cocktail shrimp had been there. So this is on New Year's. We got some cocktail shrimp, and decimated it between us. And I just made the comment 4 years ago, apparently we needed to get more shrimp. Well, this year, I've been experimenting lately in the last year or so with different ways of cooking shrimp and adding it to dishes and what's a better way of doing it. And a lot of times we'd buy frozen shrimp in a bag from Costco, and I would throw this pre-cooked shrimp in there. Mm-hmm. I said, I've been cooking it lately in a certain way and then chilling it immediately, and it's actually tasted a lot better. I've added it to sushi and that kind of thing, so I'll cook my own shrimp before putting it in sushi. And I said, so I'll make the shrimp. Well, so I told you get a bag of frozen raw shrimp at Costco.
Yes.
I cooked the whole bag and put it on a tray and brought it, and we made a homemade homemade cocktail sauce.
Yes.
Over at the Baron's house, and it was like 5 people standing around that thing going, and it was gone almost instantaneously. And then, so then like a few days later, I see this picture looking back at 4 years ago. And then I shared the picture in our group, and I said, apparently we didn't learn our lesson from 4 years ago. We repeated it. And so now the 3 of you are responsible for saying next year, we need to make sure that we make extra shrimp. Yeah. Because we always run out.
And honestly, it was less shrimp this year because we thought, well, only 3 or 4 people.
No,
not enough.
I've been thinking about that shrimp ever since. By the way, for the last week.
While we were just having conversation, enjoying cocktails and conversation, I brought up the idea that I am intrigued about going to this hermitage at Pacham and Terrace in Minnesota, but I will admit I'm starting to feel a little more fear. I was bold on the podcast. I felt it in the podcast 2 weeks ago. I was like, I got to go. I feel a calling to go and do this thing that I would never normally do. And now 2 weeks have passed, and I'm like, I don't know if that's a good idea. I mean, silence for me is harder.
And if you're a new listener to the program, and if you didn't hear us talk about it in the past, I've been there a couple times. These are truly hermitages, no electricity, no running water. There is heat, so if you're going up in
April,
whenever it's going to be in Minnesota and it's still cold, you'll have heat. So that's a good thing. Make sure you crack the window though, because the heat can,
make it too hot.
No, you can die of carbon monoxide poisoning. No, actually, that's just the lantern. The lantern. If you turn on the lantern, the heat's fine. You'll be fine.
Okay.
If you turn on the lantern, make sure you crack the window, or you'll die.
So I will have firelight.
Light
by fire. If I want to read at night,
bring your book light.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But so I've been there a couple times, and it's an amazing place. If you have the means, I highly recommend it.
Okay.
To quote the great Ferris Bueller.
So I mentioned this to Catherine, and very quickly she's like, what if I went with you? Not like to be in your cabin with you, obviously, but we could travel together, and then she could have her own hermitage and I'll have mine. And, it doesn't matter how far apart or close we are, but then we can have the benefit of having a travel companion, have an experience, check out at the same time, and then travel back and reflect and share and that kind of thing. And I thought, oh, well, okay, but I wasn't really sure how serious it was. I thought it could have been like, oh, like, let's do lunch, like a platitude in a way. Like, she didn't really mean it. So we didn't really talk about it again until we saw each other at teacher training. And she says, we should try to schedule that because I'm an ER nurse and I have to plan my schedule. So if you want to make this happen, let's get it on the books. I'm like, okay. Oh boy. Yes, let's plan. And so I'm just kind of feeling the fear and I'm just going to do it anyway. And that's kind of the lesson that I wanted to impart on you, because there are things in life where you kind of want this experience, but you've never had this experience before. So because you don't have any references to sort of emotionally prepare for it, it can make you feel a little fearful. But that doesn't mean you should cave into the fear and not do this thing. So I'm going to just feel the fear and do it anyway. And there are other things I'd like to do this year where I've never done before, and it's a big experience, but maybe we just got to feel the fear and do it anyway. If it's truly a good thing to do, it's not a self-serving thing. I feel vulnerable in these moments, like going on a silent retreat. But you know what? I think that's why I have to go, honestly, is to face myself in that cabin. And sometimes that's scary. Like we don't like to look in a mirror and see the truth of who we are and what we're made of. And you really get confronted with that when you look at your vulnerability. And then I need to commune with God in that moment and see what the Lord has for me. And now I'll have the benefit of quiet, no distractions, so that I can try to fill my little emotional, spiritual cup with God. And so I'm hoping this experience will sort of get me in that right direction.
Can I make some recommendations for you? For
the Pacem?
For going on your hermitage retreat.
Oh, absolutely.
And some of it comes from their own recommendations. So there's a book called Postinia, I believe, that I bought a copy of it during one of my retreats there. Catherine currently has our copy of it, so you might want to get that back. Might be worth just breezing through, not reading it page for page, but getting a sense of the origin of it and the thoughts behind it. Because the idea is you are going into silence with God. And one of the things that they recommend is that you obviously don't bring your electronics. So bring your phone, leave your phone in your car. If you want to take pictures, what I did, I don't know if you remember the first time I went, I actually took an old phone that we still had laying around and I blanked it all out. It couldn't connect to the internet, but it had a camera on it. And I walked around and took pictures. Or just bring a regular camera if you want for that. If you want to take pictures, right? The second time I went, I don't think I took any pictures. So I said you can bring your light, but they actually recommended, I showed up with way too many books, as if I was going to show up and like just do nothing but read for 24 hours. Have a journal, have your Bible. If you have a third book that you're working on, you can bring it. But I kind of, next time I go, I'm going to bring Liturgy of the Hours, my Bible, and a journal, and I'm not going to bring any other reading material. So even at night when I want to read, I'm just going to read my Bible. I'm just going to keep going because that's actually what they recommend for that hermitage experience.
Because that's how you hear God, is in the words He wrote for you.
I super loved the food basket, and I appreciated more the second time I went. I only did their food basket, but the first time I was too scared to just trust that. And I bought protein bars. I bought Jiffy Pop popcorn so I can make
protein.
it. So I was scared, but go in as simply as you can. That's it.
Yeah.
Look up Minnesota weather and bring appropriate clothes for whatever month that's going to be. But
I did ask. I actually called and I verified some dates and availability. Everything works out. So right now we're actively looking at mid-April for a joint trip out to our first hermitage experience.
I'll be very interested to hear how the two of you handle when you've gone for individual walks and you're passing each other in the woods at Pacem, how you will handle that.
Just like head nod.
Did you actually talk to someone at Pacem?
Yeah.
You didn't talk to Tim, did you?
No, some guy named David answered the phone, and I told him that I'm good friends with Mr. Tim Drake, but that I'm sure, he can answer every question I have. And he just gave me some of the housekeeping bullet points that I would need to know for arranging travel. It is about an hour and a half drive from the airport.
Yeah.
So you have to secure that transportation yourself, try to arrive at this, window of time. And I asked him, well, what is the weather like in Minnesota in mid-April? Like, is it still really chilly there?
Don't know.
And he goes, well, it's very spring-like usually. no mosquitoes. Oh, thank the Lord.
Yeah.
I was worried about that. That's more like June and July. But that it could be chilly at night.
Definitely will be.
And it will start to, but you can have a nice warm day. Things are waking up. So he says it's actually quite a beautiful time.
Yeah.
April and May are very beautiful
So
here.
you're locked in on those days?
No, I'm not locked in. We're still talking to our husbands because we want to make sure our husbands are on board. So Catherine's talking to Mac,
Well,
and
I
I'm
think-
talking to Greg.
I think maybe the husbands should go first and go check it out. And
But this is an
I would not want to be
intense-
there at the same time as Mac. I love you, Mac. Wouldn't want to be there at the same time as you.
That would be tough. You guys passing each other on the walking trail.
I wouldn't trust him to stay away from my cabin.
He would throw like pine cones at
Yeah.
your hermitage from
You
his
know,
hermitage.
you flat out know he would not be able to resist the temptation. He would go,
And I don't. Some people just really can't do the silent retreat, or it's not for them. And I don't know if it is. I've only done it once before when I was pregnant with Tommy.
Well, I'm happy for you,
you.
and I'm a little jealous of you too, but in all the good ways.
Well, that tracks.
So that's typical. That's typical for us. So we had mentioned the AI thing, and I don't want to spend a lot of time because we've already gone over an hour, and we need to wrap it up. So maybe this will be a subject for next time. But I want to show you something. So I use Notion as my primary way of writing things, tracking things, getting things done. I love it. This is not a paid thing. I love Notion, and I've been using it for a couple of years now. We do all of our show notes in Notion. I don't have it set up to easily show you the screen right now. I kind of wish I thought to do that. But what Notion has recently added, and it's in alpha testing right now, is their own AI capability, and it ties into. There's an AI engine that many different services can tie into. So depending on the service that you're using, you might get similar results. But I like Notion, and in the middle of using Notion, it now has the ability for you to ask it to help you write things, to brainstorm ideas, to write elevator pitches, all sorts of things. So,
Can I ask AI what to make for dinner?
sure,
Will it tell me?
That's a fantastic thing right there. So I was going to do something different, but we'll start with that. I could just say brainstorm ideas, and so we'll do this.
Dinner for a picky family.
What can I make for dinner for a picky family for the next week? And I'm just putting this into Notion, and then I'm going to click a button that says generate, and we're going to see
We're going to read you.
how fast make a variety. See how fast it's saying it.
Wow.
Make a variety of sandwiches with different types of bread, cheese, and meats. Bake a lasagna with multiple layers of different cheeses. Create a stir fry with a mix of vegetables and favorite proteins. Make a pot roast with potatoes and carrots. Grill burgers and hot dogs. Put together a taco bar with all the fixings. Prepare chicken parmesan with pasta and marinara sauce. Make a shepherd's pie with ground beef, cheese, and potatoes. Prepare a delicious pizza with various toppings. Create a homemade macaroni and cheese with various types of cheese.
That
Instantly.
is brilliant.
So that's now what I was going to ask. It's funny that you went to. So what I'm going to say is this. I'm going to say.
Well, hold on. I do need to say something before you switch up the question and get the response. I was initially impressed. Yes, I'm not going to lie.
By how quickly it came up with it?
Yes. However, what it's doing kind of scares me. It's thinking for me.
Sure.
So that I don't use that part of my brain anymore,
Okay.
which now leaves me a new part of the brain to atrophy out because I'm not using it.
So this
I
is
don't
why
know if I want to use that.
This is why this will be a good subject for the next show.
Nope.
We're going to talk about AI. And we want to hear from you on your thoughts of it before we dive into it. Are you using it? How have you found it useful? What do you find scary about it? And why should we not be afraid of AI?
Be afraid.
And the whole thing started with the idea of moral complicity. If I get angry at a AI generated message being sent out to me via text or phone or whatever, is it okay for me to get angry at this artificial intelligence knowing that it's not a real intelligence? So do I have moral complicity there? So the thing I was going to type was, what are 5 ways to overcome fear? That because we were talking about overcoming fear, right?
Feel the fear and do it anyway.
And so identify the source of your fear, acknowledge and validate your feelings, practice visualization and positive affirmations, face your fear and take small steps, take time to so these are pretty basic things. But the great thing about this is if you're writing a blog or if you're writing a script or writing a video or something like that, it gets you started.
Ask this question. How to
so
make...
funny how you just went from fear and atrophy to
Now I'm just curious.
Ask it this question.
How to make an introvert happy.
Okay. So I'm going to say how to write, help me write, how to make an
introverted person, maybe.
Introverted person happy. And it says, oh, see, I didn't hit space. Okay, here we go.
Okay,
Hold on.
I see it. I see it.
Where did it
It's
start?
interesting. It
Okay.
really did something.
Okay. Provide a safe and comfortable space for them. Okay.
You agree?
Let them know you are available to listen without judgment. I don't know.
I think you would appreciate that. Okay, go ahead. What's another?
Offer activities that don't require too much interaction with others. Bing! Yes. Allow them time for self-reflection and solitude. Yes. Respect their need for personal space. Yes. Give them time to process and gather their thoughts. Yes. Acknowledge their accomplishments, no matter how small. I guess, but then there's a certain level of embarrassment for the desire to be acknowledged.
That's you, though. That's not everybody.
No, that should be everybody.
No, that's you.
Encourage them to try new things at their own pace. Share humorous moments to lighten the mood. Make time for meaningful conversations. Invite them to enjoy a shared experience. I don't know. Some of them, yeah.
Yeah.
So there you go.
All right.
That's
There
all we
you
got for you this week. We'd love to hear from you. Feedback at gregandjennifer.com. Make sure you go over and take advantage of the various things that are available at rosaryarmy.com. And if you so desire to help that ministry of 20 years, you can go over to rosaryarmy.com/donate. We so appreciate your time and choosing to spend it with us every single week. We always encourage you to pray your rosary every day. Make that a commitment in this year. Really grow in love of God by praying the rosary.
And do whatever it takes to be holy.
We'll talk to you in a few days. God bless you, folks. Bye.
Bye.